So I'd already done the last part of Nietzsche, but I thought James could add some stuff. So I'm just recording over it and doing the last part again. So James can add. I'll talk about these movies first. This one, Hotel Artemis, was so bad. Really bad.
Is it got rock in it or? Okay.
But I don't know who the big guy was. But anyway, and this one,
he's even uglier than Rock. That's amazing. Okay. Or Dwayne Johnson. Or whatever.
Fine. Hold the Sunset stars John Cleese and some other folks, and it was bad, so bad. The theme music was terrible, but you know, the children in this, the woman has a couple kids, and it starts out where the woman she's sitting there with her boyfriend, they're older, they're retired, and he lives across the street, and he's been asking her to marry him for a long time, and she keeps saying no. And then finally she's coming around to the idea. So she's being persuaded by him and to do this, and then her older son, he moves in, and without asking or anything, he just decides he's going to leave his family and come move in with her. And he's quit his job, everything. Anyway, and so he has these expectations of her, and then it's the woman's birthday, and she has birthday decorations she set up for herself and stuff, and her daughter comes in and she's acting all nice to her, and then it comes out, oh well, you should move in with me and sell your house, and then I will be able to borrow this amount of money from you, which I'll pay back, you know, and everything. So then her daughter's making demands of her, and so everybody is trying to pull her in whatever direction. She has no say about it. And so that's interesting and sadly very realistic.
Welcome to the joys of growing old.
Yes.
One of those stories sounds eerily familiar.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like a horror story.
Yeah.
We won't go into it.
Anyway, the Amish and the Reformation. I put down this was an excellent documentary. The man who hosts the documentary really did his homework and put together a 55-minute presentation everyone should watch. You can see where he gets his passion for learning and teaching from. His parents also told their stories well. I'm certain his parents were very pleased with their son making this documentary on the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther nailing the 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg and starting the Reformation in Germany. It says a lot that the old German Bible was used for service, and few actually understood it. I appreciated the truth revealed that one would just quote another in service, having thought they were quoting the Bible, but not actually doing so. It wasn't the Bible, and they were thinking that they were doing that because they didn't actually understand the Bible written in old German.
Didn't actually look at it.
So and it wasn't expected it was expected for them to not look at the Bible, to not use the Bible. So anyway, so I found that really interesting, and I thought that the documentary was a perfect length because at the end I wanted more. I'm sure you felt that way too, that you wanted more information about it, right?
Twice as long.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a fault in the documentary. He provided a lot of great information that kept me interested the whole way along. Now I did fall asleep at some point, but
right near the end. I had about 5 minutes to go. So.
But it was great. It was very entertaining, and I don't know how I managed to fall asleep.
Well, you were getting ready to go to sleep.
Yeah, I was.
So was I. It kept me awake. So.
Keep bashing that knuckle. Anyway, yeah, and the fact that I wanted it to go longer just makes me think, well, I can do my own research, right? And that's a good thing. So if something prompts me to want to do research, it's That's good. They did the job. Okay. There we go. So I'm on to the... Boy, it's really warm. I didn't need this sweater at all.
It's quite neat.
Okay. So I ended with Nietzsche sending the book about Zarathustra to the publisher. And apparently Wagner died the day prior to that, and so Nietzsche was thinking, it's a sign kind of thing, or whatever. So that's page 234. And 235, the publisher Schmitzner wasn't eager to print, claimed printer's delays. Nietzsche said that Schmitzner might have had the money to pay the printer if he had not squandered it on anti-Semitic pamphlets. Nietzsche was dosing himself with dangerous drugs, writing out prescriptions and signing them Dr. Nietzsche. The Italian pharmacist gave him everything he requested. And I think that's funny, you know. And honestly, I don't like the woman who wrote the book. She was kind of portraying it as he was being careless, and maybe he was actually causing his own psychosis or whatever. He was actually, the things that he was trying to treat, he was creating with his medication. And maybe, but you don't. Nobody self-medicates for no reason, whether it's street drugs that they're taking or whatever. There's always a reason behind it. So he wasn't getting the help he needed, and he tried several times. He went to many different doctors with many different diagnoses, and most of the things were doing him harm, the treatments that he was getting from the doctors. And it's easy to see that now, right? But, I mean, some of the things he was getting, like, I don't know if it mattered if he was wearing blue glasses. Whatever. You know, I don't think that would really do anything for you. But I don't know that he was doing any worse for himself, writing out prescriptions under Dr. Nietzsche. So, anyway, 236. Victim of a disturbance in nature. That's what he considered himself to be. He blamed the geography and climate of Europe for his physical and mental maladies, and then now at this point, he was living near it, so he blamed Mount Etna for the problems he had previously attributed to the electricity in the clouds. The energy flow of the volcano, which was busy grumbling and threatening to erupt, was responsible for his fluctuating symptoms. And I'm not gonna, like, it sounds crazy, really, to blame electricity or whatever, but you know, honestly, we have electricity moving through us. I mean, our blood has a lot of iron in it. We're really influenced by things like that. And he might have been right. I mean, there's some people that now, if you think about it, there's some people that can't even be around like in areas where they can get cell phone reception and stuff like that. It's pretty much, at first people were thinking, oh, this is a joke, you know, people being sensitive to like electromagnetism and stuff like that. And now people are pretty much accepting it. So some people can't handle it, and maybe he couldn't. Maybe he was picking up on this. I don't know. I'm not even going to discredit that. I'm not going to say, oh, crazy. Nope. He might have been onto something. I don't know. I mean, he might have been doing a better job diagnosing himself than his doctors were. Why trust them? They weren't getting the job done. 249. Nietzsche told Dr. Julius Paneth, Viennese Jewish zoologist that was a fan of his, that he had always felt he had a mission, and that he had the capacity for seeing images when he closed his eyes, very vivid ones, which were always changing. There was an inspirational quality to them, but physical discomfort, such as illnesses, turned them ugly, frightening, and unpleasant. 252. Nietzsche's eyes pained him greatly, and there were bouts of vomiting that lasted for days on end. The doctors had no answers for his eyes, or his ruined stomach, or for any prospects of sleep. So he resorted again to self-medication, relying heavily on powders of chloral hydrate, a powerful hypnotic drug and sedative used to relieve insomnia and reduce anxiety. Incorrect doses of this drug produce nausea, vomiting, hallucinations, confusion, convulsions, breathing, and heart irregularities. But I mean, keep in mind too that a lot of medications that are prescribed today for depression have the side effect of suicide and stuff like that. So, I mean, this is not really shocking for me to hear this, because I actually have looked at the side effects of different drugs that are given today. 261. Forster was vegetarian, and his pet name for Elizabeth was Eli, which Nietzsche found funny since it was Hebrew for my God, and which, that's pretty funny, right? Because, I mean, Forster and Elizabeth were anti-Semites, right? So, Nietzsche ate almost exclusively egg yolks, meat, rhubarb tea, cognac, and grog at that point in time. And that's 1885. And that's not a very diverse diet. I don't think that would be very healthy. 263, Nietzsche decided to tell people he was not German but Polish, and that his ancestral name had been Nietzsche, which he said meant nihilist. And James had commented on this because the author was saying, she was kind of presenting it as though Nietzsche was really making it up to get at Elizabeth and Forster. But James said, well, Nietzsche's not a German name.
It doesn't seem like one.
So he thinks, yeah, it might have been.
There's a lot of names, Prussian names, that are Polish or Czech.
Because he says the whole, like, TZ sound.
That is not a German kind of sound.
Yeah. So there you go. So he might not have been making it up. And he probably wasn't German. Of German ancestry. 269, which meant neither was Elizabeth. So if she was Polish, and that's even funnier, right? So 263, Nietzsche decided to have, I said that already. 269, the first sentence of Beyond Good and Evil, supposing that truth is a woman, and why not? Aren't there reasons for suspecting that all philosophers, to the extent that they have been dogmatists, have not really understood women? 279, Twilight of the Idols, 1889 essay, Improving Humanity. To call the domestication of an animal an improvement almost sounds like a joke to us. Anyone who knows what goes on in a zoo will have doubts whether beasts are improved there. They become weak, they become less healthful, they are made ill through the use of pain, injury, and hunger, and depressive effect of fear. Same thing happens with domes. I don't know what I wrote there.
Domesticated people.
Domesticated people who have been improved by priests. In the early Middle Ages, when the church was basically a zoo, the choicest specimens of the blonde beast were hunted down everywhere. People like the Teuton nobles were subjected to improvement, but what did an improved Teuton look like after being seduced into a cloister? He looked like a caricature of a human being, like a miscarriage. He turned into a sinner. He was stuck in a cage, locked up inside all sorts of horrible ideas. There he lay, sick, miserable, full of malice against himself, hating the drive for life, suspicious of everything that was still strong and happy. In short, a Christian. The church understood this. It has ruined people. It has weakened them, but it claims to have improved them. 288. Each colonist had to conduct business only within the Forster colony. Forster fidgeted constantly, the personification of a bad conscience who could not look you in the eye. That's a quote. Klingbeil, 1888, had been interested in joining the colony, but found it to be less than advertised. He exposed the Forsters as fraudulent tyrants. He claimed that the colonists worked like poor day laborers, while the Forsters sat on European furniture and ate meat off their well-polished dining table. Elizabeth said he was a liar, and I suspect he actually was, because I don't think they were eating meat. They wouldn't have been doing that at that point, because they were vegetarian. It was fashionable to be vegetarian. Hitler was a pescatarian. Not at this time, I don't think, but...
Well, he lived to see her
he did live to,
funeral.
Yeah. So I don't know.
He came from that crazy tradition.
Yes, so it was popular at the time to sway your diet in that direction.
Sure.
So anyway, I doubt that they were eating meat. 301. Meta von Salis Marschlins was one of the new women feminists. She'd studied law and philosophy at Zurich University. She was the first Swiss woman to get a doctorate. Aristocratic radicalism. She wasn't interested in the happiness of the herd, she said. Women of innate nobility and intelligence should have civic rights, though, she said. 303. Nietzsche felt Dostoevsky was a kindred spirit. Christianity had been polluted by its legacy, which was called religion. After reading The House of the Dead, Nietzsche wrote about pity. Pity is decadent. It is the practice of nihilism. Pity negates life. It wins people over to nothingness. Though it is not called nothingness, it's called the beyond, or God, or the truth, life, or nirvana, or salvation. 305. Twilight of the Idols was a challenge to Wagner's Twilight of the Gods. Its subtitle was How to Philosophize with a Hammer. Starts with 44 aphorisms, and here's a few. Is man God's mistake, or is God man's mistake? What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. If you have your why in life, you can get along with almost anyhow. People don't strive for happiness, only the English do. Now, James, you're going to have to fix that one, because he told me that it was a poor translation, and actually it should be something about utility and stuff. Yeah?
Let me see.
I can find it in the book for you if it's easier.
Oh, yeah, happiness would... Well, he might have translated it himself. I'd have to see the original. But I think it was more like utility. But, yeah, he might have said happiness. I mean, there's that at the back of it with utility. It's anyway, it might not be a good translation.
James gave me a much bigger explanation in the house when he just doesn't talk in front of the camera. Anyway, so you don't want to talk about utilitarianism and the English.
Well, I want to see the original, actually, now that I think about it. Sometimes you...
Okay.
No,
the perfect woman commits literature the way she commits a small sin, as an experiment, in passing, looking around to see whether anyone noticed and to make certain someone has noticed. Evil men have no songs, so why do the Russians have songs? When you look for beginnings, you become a crab. Historians look backward, and they end up believing backward too. Contentment protects you even from colds. Has a woman who knew she was well-dressed ever caught a cold? How little is required for happiness? The sound of a bagpipe. Without music, life would be a mistake. Germans even imagine God singing songs. I distrust all systematizers and avoid them. The will to a system is a lack of integrity. Do you want to explain that one?
Okay. I distrust all systematizers and avoid them. So he's talking generally about philosophers, but it could be all sorts of systematizers.
Like priests.
The will to a system, there's a lack of, he's generally talking about philosophers, a lack of integrity. So philosophers, the worst of them, tend to want to make a big system. But of course it's not nearly as big as reality, so it's hugely pervertacious when it's compared with reality. So Hegel would be that way, one of his predecessors, right? German, Spinoza would be that way. He was a Jewish Dutch dude, wanted to systemize stuff. Kant was probably somewhat similar, maybe in between. Philosophers tend to want to do this. He was more into breaking down systems.
So, and Nietzsche targets Socrates, Plato, Germany, free will, improving humanity, priests, and philosophers.
Why did you leave it at Socrates and Plato? Why didn't you take out all the philosophers?
It would have been a much thicker book.
It would not necessarily just say they're all bozos. Like he says Plato is boring somewhere. And he should just said all philosophers are boring.
336. Professor Wille?
Villa? W-I-L-L-E.
Villa.
That just means whale, right?
Was an authority on syphilis. Nietzsche told him he'd infected himself twice, and it was assumed that he meant syphilis, but it was actually gonorrhea that he'd gotten in truth. So Wille was convinced Nietzsche had late-stage syphilis because of his symptoms.
Some.
Well, sure.
Yeah,
and
it doesn't fit the symptoms, right?
No, not all. But, I mean, it could have been something else, like...
No, I think so. I think he was bipolar and was self-medicating.
Yeah. Anyway, page 360, December 1895. Elizabeth drew up a contract to give her sole copyright of Nietzsche's manuscripts and papers. She offered her mother 30,000 marks for all the rights and royalties from his work, which was just about nothing. Because at that time they were starting to really pick up and sell. So she knew it was nothing. Well, she didn't want to sell them.
I know.
She did it. So anyway, when Francisca died at age 71 in April 1897, she gained full control of Nietzsche the man, as well as all his works. 369, Elizabeth inherited 36,000 marks from Nietzsche when he died. So, I mean, she didn't have to pay for anything to get control of him. She made lots of money off him. 373. 150,000 copies of Zarathustra were printed in a pocket edition for German soldiers of World War I with Goethe's Faust and Faust and New Testament to take to battle with them. 378. She spent much of her time in bed near her 90th birthday. She had Mein Kampf read to her. She died painlessly and peacefully on November 8th, 1935 from flu. And at one point, like, Nietzsche had said to her, "You don't know what it means to do anything useful or whatever." He was basically telling her she's useless, and so she really showed him. She
outlived him.
Yeah, and she got to die peacefully, whereas he lived in suffering his whole life, and she got all of his money and everything. So anyway, it worked out for her because she was a devious little lady. So she'd been nominated for a Nobel Prize. I don't know for what, because she did nothing. She'd been awarded an honorary doctorate from the ancient University of Jena.
Jena, that's how you say that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Jena.
It's in Prussia. Still there.
I don't know anything about it. Doctorate in what? Because she did nothing. She presided over the vast sale of Nietzsche's books. She had a friendship with Hitler, which is probably why she was nominated for the prize and the doctorate. Elizabeth and Cosima Wagner were praised as priestesses of eternal Germany.
Germany was almost destroyed 10 years after she died because of their stupid attitudes.
I am frightened, Nietzsche had written, by the thought of what unqualified and unsuitable people may invoke my authority one day. Yet that is the torment of every great teacher of mankind. He knows that given the circumstances and the accidents, he can become a disaster as well as a blessing to mankind. 384. Christianity is a romantic hypochondria for those unsteady on their feet. The very word Christianity is misunderstanding. In truth, there was only one Christian and he died on the cross. 385. People are least related to their parents. It would be the greatest vulgarity to be related to your parents. One may pay dearly for immortality. One has to die several times while one is still alive. I'm not a man, I am dynamite, he said, which is why that's the book title. God is dead, but given the way of men, there may still be caves for thousands of years in which his shadow will be shown. And we still have to vanquish his shadows too. Remember in, what's the series that I just watched? Was it called Legion? I think so. There were all the one narrator bit was about the shadows in the caves, and so it's obviously that Legion was it was the character David in that is supposed to be Nietzsche, I think. I think it's pretty clear. And at one point David in the story, he says people pretty much think he's schizophrenic the whole time. He's been diagnosed as schizophrenic, but then he might be a superhero. So, like a Superman, right? And so there's that. And then at one point, he's in a fake reality where he's in the mental ward and he's been diagnosed as bipolar. And he's like, oh, I wasn't schizophrenic, what are you talking about? I'm bipolar. And his girlfriend's like, no, this isn't right, kind of thing. But anyway, I think it's pretty obvious. So if you watch, I would highly recommend you watch that series and read this book because they're awesome. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent, if not the greatness of this deed too great? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? The rationality of a thing is no argument against it, rather a condition of it. Today, as always, men fall into two groups, slaves and free men. Whoever does not have 2/3 of his day for himself is a slave, whatever he may be, a statesman, a businessman, an official, or a scholar. If it is true that the forests are going to get thinner, might the time come when libraries should be used for firewood? Since most books are born out of smoke and vapor of the brain, maybe they should return to that state. If they have no fire in them, fire should punish them for it. And I can honestly say that this book should not be one of those that are burned. It's very good. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And it took me a long time to get to read it because honestly I got it out thinking, one day James might die, and I use him as an encyclopedia, honestly. Anytime I need to know anything about history or people of history or politics, or there's a number of things, I just ask him. He knows right off the top of his head. He can rattle off for usually a couple hours. I'll get him started on something, he'll just keep going. Unless I have him in front of the camera, then quiet as a mouse. I don't know what to do about this. But anyway, so I got this out thinking, well, I better learn this stuff for myself so that I know it really well.
Yeah, this guy had a dangerous influence, not just on Hitler. It's not killer influence, but he died around 1900. Do you have the exact date? Somewhere around there.
I don't know. It'd be in the book somewhere, but I didn't really care.
But for the last 10 years of his life, he was a wacko. I mean, he was never so popular, right? He was unpopular till he went crazy. And from him, it was in the cards, this idea about great men 100 years before, more with Napoleon. But it was particularly strong with continental Europeans, and it more from the French to the Germans. But it eventually spread all over the world. So you had these great men, particularly starting about 1890, went crazy in 1889. Great men, geniuses allied to madness, and all this sort of stuff. And what came out of this kind of garbage is Picasso, 1905, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, I think it was 1905, a horrible canvas. It's supposed to be the most influential canvas, perhaps, of the 20th century. Pablo Picasso went on for about 70 years doing the similar kind of craps and stuff like that. He was a genius, because he just, was expressing the wildness of his great imagination and stuff like that. 1905. Oh yeah, that's when the special theory of relativity is